Hello there, my name is Cedric or Stupid You. I am the creator of FreeGameFindings, and today I am once again doing something a little bit different for this YouTube channel. Recently, I reached out to the individual behind Bliss-Box, a company that develops retro controller adapter products. I had been eyeing up some of their stuff recently as I've been wanting to use NES, SNES, and even N64 controllers on my PC without having to buy like third-party USB versions of them, of course. As such, I found my way to the GPA, the Gamer Pro Advanced USB adapter, which can convert a bunch of retro controllers to USB through HID or X input. In partnership with Bliss-Box, I am happy to announce that FGF will be giving a couple of those away, bundled with your choice of controller cables. To go alongside that promotion, I will be doing an unboxing and even a review of two of Bliss-Box's products right here. Those two being the GPA, as well as a slightly newer item of theirs, the Bridge. Now the Bridge is a means of taking a controller from one console and using it on another. Think a PS2 controller being used on an N64. The GPA and Bridge being used together grant the capability of getting your gaming control scheme set up exactly how you want it. Stay tuned until the end to hear more about how you can win your very own Gamer Pro Advanced bundle from Bliss-Box. Huge thanks to them for supplying my own stuff here for this video. Without further ado, let's unbox my Gamer Pro Advanced and Bridge bundle. Packaged in a general protective shipping sleeve, ignore the damage to said sleeve, that was because of me taking off a label, we find a gaggle of items. When buying Bliss-Box products, you're generally expected to purchase a selection of cables for the specific controllers you're using. We'll chat about my choices as we get there. A few cables are loose purely due to the box not supporting them, I guess, but that's fine. Digging deeper in, we see my Gamer Pro Advanced and Bridge both in individually branded boxes. There also happened to be a loose card with some information about the Bridge itself. It's even complete with a typo or two. It happens, man. We'll start off with the GPA, another information slip, but for it, of course. Inside the box, we see all of my cables and the GPA itself in a little rubber holder thingy. Kicking it off, we see the Gamer Pro Advanced, HDMI input on one end, USB output on the other. Taking a look at the cables to pair with it, GameCube, PS2, NES, and 64. Each of these take an input from their respective controller and have an HDMI output on the other end. Let's take one of the cables and pop it into the GPA. Brief little demo here with one of my personal, not included of course, N64 controllers. You can kind of see the idea of what this product is going for. With these guys all together, I can get my controllers over to USB for use on my PC or other USB-able devices. There's a lot of configuration that can be done with these as well, but we'll look into that later on in the review/demo section. For now though, let's get into the Bridge. Starting off will be the loose cables we saw earlier. You'll notice that they are specifically labeled, as well as the fact that they seem to have some extra adapters attached to them. This is by design and is a requirement for some configurations. Both of my choices required these controller port adapters. Your mileage may in fact vary. First up is the SNES controller cable, which as you can tell requires an NES adapter, HDMI on one end and an SNES output on the other, after the adapter. Second cable we've got is the N64 controller, again another adapter, a GameCube one this time. Cast these aside for a moment and we can get into the Bridge's box. The Bridge itself houses a USB input on one end and the HDMI input, yes input, on the other. The last thing in the box we have is this little dongle. It's to be used for updating the firmware of the Bridge and apparently can also be used for USB device input as well. Finally, here's a quick demo, I guess, showing the GPA and the Bridge being connected together, without the cables and controllers and whatever all supposed to be in there. You can see what they're going for. In closing, here we have all of my items, the Bridge, the GPA, and a bunch of cables to pair with them. Alright, now with everything unboxed and all, let's get to actually playing. Well, kind of. We have a thing or two to do before really getting into that. While making this video, it came to light that it is highly recommended to update the firmware for whichever Bliss-Box products you purchase. I was able to use my GPA without doing so at all on my PC, but it possibly could have lacked some fixes that I just didn't notice. Not to mention, me not updating that actually ended up interfering with me using it with the Bridge, as there was some sort of change between the two of them. The Bridge itself actually might end up being completely fine for you, but I think the default way that it comes after purchase is configured for PS3 usage. To use the Bridge on another console, you would need to change that. In my scenario, I'm going to need the firmware and drivers for the GPA and the Bridge. Oh, and I'll also need the Bliss-Box software to install them. You can snag all of this from the download section of the Bliss-Box website. Something to note about this though is that my browser was noticing that the downloads are coming from a website without a secure connection, meaning it's not HTTPS. There's even a little note about this on the download page now. This and or it being a zip file caused it to be blocked by my browser. I did end up proceeding with it and things all look completely fine, but I just wanted to mention that. Like when I download anything, I always make sure to scan it with Windows Defender or Malwarebytes for some added peace of mind. I did all of these things off screen and ended up getting some assistance from Sean at Bliss-Box when I got stuck doing some firmware updating. There is thorough documentation, but at least there is a safety net to go to if you need a little bit of support, being the contact and support section of the site. With everything updated, I'm finally ready to rock. To start things off, let's look at using my GPA on my PC. I hope you enjoy the recording that I have here, trying to showcase the controller and all, but yeah. Enjoy. I've got my GPA here with an N64 controller plugged into it through the adapter. I plug the GPA into a USB port of my computer and get the little Windows chime for a USB device being plugged in. In this random emulator I'm testing on, I've gone in and mapped the input to my buttons on the real controller. After saving it and all, we can see that I'm playing on my PC with a real N64 controller just fine. The keen-eyed among you might even notice that my controller's seen better days, but let's just ignore that. For the fun of it, let's go ahead and try out another controller I've got. Here we have an NES controller, and I've gone and hooked it up into the GPA. I'm going to need to remap my controls a little bit, as I no longer have an analog stick. With everything we see here, we get an official controller, well, a couple of them actually, being used directly on my computer, all thanks to the GPA. As mentioned earlier, the GPA converts these controllers for use on PC with HID or X input. This felt pretty plug and play. Again, you could update the drivers and should update the drivers for other sorts of fixes, but this out of the box felt fine for me, when using it on my computer, of course. Using the Bliss-Box API tool, you can actually go and configure a lot of stuff about all of these things even further, such as remapping controls if you wanted to. Hell, you could actually use the tool to pull memory card information from controllers. Be sure to check out the Bliss-Box YouTube channel and documentation for more info on stuff like this. Now that we've seen the GPA, let's go ahead and start taking a look at the bridge. As we see here, I've got an SNES, a GPA, the bridge, and an N64 controller. A nice big jumble of stuff all connected to one another. Let's give the system a boot. One of the things I saw mentioned in the documentation for the bridge is that you might want to give everything a few seconds before you start pressing any buttons. The bridge takes a moment to detect the console and controller being used and sync it all up together. After the wait, we can start enjoying our favorite game with our favorite controller. The bridge does its best to map controllers in the most reasonable way. I believe you can, once again, edit the layout within the API tool if there's something more ideal for your use, but for now we can see that it's working as we expect. Shifting over a little bit, we can try out the NES controller too. I've obviously lost functionality, again I have less buttons and such, but as we see here, we've got both an NES and an N64 controller working on the SNES, all thanks to the bridge. There is one note about this whole thing though, and it's that not every game for every console has already been tested. It's kind of impossible to nail that down 100% for anybody, let alone a small or single person team. We can actually see here that one of my two SNES games that still work these days doesn't seem to be supported. Neither controller was working with the bridge, unfortunately. When something like this occurs, the ability to reach out for support in some kind of way is there. Sean from Bliss-Box is well versed in all of this and has insight on a variety of things related to these situations. I brought up my snafu and he found that he could replicate the exact same issue. Then he said that he would work on getting an update in a patch to the console firmware for the bridge to try to solve the problem. More obscure games that might have different abnormalities in how they pull and stuff like that might end up being funky somehow, but the ability to reach out about these hiccups and get them solved seems to be there. Passionate and knowledgeable support is always good. Hey there, I'm just gonna cut in quick fast and make a quick note. After one day, Sean has let me know that he ended up fixing the issue with NHL 94 on SNES. Trying it out now, looking pretty good. Didn't want to remove this section from the video as it serves as an example of games not working, but now I can also showcase that Bliss-Box is on the hunt to fix the issues when they arise. So now, to kind of close things out, what do I think of the products that I've got here? To recap, I've got myself a GPA, the Gamer Pro Advanced, and an adapter cables to use N64, NES, PS2, and GameCube controllers with it. Then I've got the bridge and adapter cables to use it on the SNES and N64 consoles. In terms of the GPA, I love it. I'm mostly on PC these days, but I do get that periodic itch to play retro console games here and there. Doing so with real official controllers is something that I really find genuinely fantastic. I'm very excited about doing exactly that. The only thing that sucks about that is that I forgot to request an SNES controller cable during the video, but that's not really anyone's fault but mine. To make things even nicer, I had zero issues using the GPA at Again, it was plug and play immediately. Again, you should still update that firmware. As for the bridge, it simply isn't really a thing that I myself need. I like retro console gaming, but I really just do it through emulation these days. The bridge as a product is really interesting though, and I totally see where many others can benefit. I'm one of those freaks that really liked the N64 controller. Being able to use it on, say, a Dreamcast or something is pretty cool. One thing that came up during this whole thing was possibly using the bridge as a means of emulating really specific and expensive controllers with more common ones. For instance, instead of whatever this analog controller for the Sega Mega Drive is, you can just use a PS2 controller as seen here. So there's a lot of real genuine use cases that I find pretty fascinating. The actual hang-up that I did have for the bridge was that one of my games simply didn't work as of recording. It's worth mentioning it, but as already discussed, it's being looked at and hopefully can be fixed without too much trouble. As mentioned earlier, my issue ended up getting fixed in one day. Mileage may vary there, but hey, it was fixed. Ultimately, I believe the GPA is an excellent product for anybody, of course, and great for me because it's exactly what I'm looking for and will allow me to emulate games on my computer with something genuine in my hands as well. While the bridge itself may not be what I need, and even though I did have my snafu with it, I do see it as a pretty strong addition to your retro game console setup if you really dig certain controllers, or maybe you're trying to not have to go buy crazy expensive ones, I guess. While not every single game has been verified, as we could tell, from my understanding a whole bunch of them already have been. That part definitely wasn't ideal, but knowing that there's a passionate developer behind it all really does make me feel that the bridge is a great product for those that are going to be able to use it. I leave with a very positive experience from both products. With all of that said and done, be sure to check out the FGF giveaway for your chance at one of 5 Gamer Pro advanced USB adapters with varying amounts of your selected included controller adapter cables. And hey, if you do win, why not take a look at buying a bridge of your very own? Thank you for watching. Huge thanks go out again to Bliss-Box for sending me all this stuff and supplying the giveaway on FGF. I hope this unboxing / product demo / review was enjoyable and informative. Another giveaway for FGF is always cool, and trying to do one for something like this is really interesting. Here's hoping there's enough crossover. I hope, like me, you are looking for a more real control feel or scheme for your emulation needs. I view Bliss-Box products as a great way to use real retro controllers on a PC and apparently even on other consoles. I envision this all being a fantastic emulation pairing for everybody that is looking for exactly that. Thanks again to Bliss-Box. It was a bunch of fun to do this. Thank you for watching and enjoy.